Hello, everyone. Welcome to 7A's Inside ESG, where we meet with leaders in sustainability, climate, and the ESG space. This series aims to provide a clear view into the ever-changing landscape of sustainability practices. I'm Doron, Marketing Director for 7E, an AI-driven compliance solution focusing on streamlining data collection and reporting for ESG, AHS, risk management, and governance. Our guest today is Ivan Van Hook. Ivan, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure. It's really, really great to be here.
Great to have you. Ivan is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Viridi Smart Distributed Energy Storage Company. In 2024, Ivan was named one of the top 15 social media influencers of the built environment by Technica magazine, and in 2022, he was named one of the world's 50 most influential executives in the field of ESG by Constellation Research and the 500 Global Sustainability Thought Leaders by the American Energy Society. He is also a graduate of Yale Law School and is both a former partner at the law firm, am I saying that right? Sidley and Austin?
Yep, Sidley Austin, exactly right.
Sidley and Austin, and Assistant Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Very impressive, and I think I went through that not too bad, right?
You did a great job.
Thanks. Thanks again for joining us today. Before we start, would you mind sharing a bit about yourself, and if you can, share with us your sustainability journey?
Great. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I've been in the sustainability area for about 35 years, so I've stayed pretty consistent with that. But of course, that context of sustainability has evolved substantially over that period. It really started out from my childhood and before law school. In my law school, we had a very close tie to our environmental science and forestry school, and I was deeply involved in the interface between law and environmental science, which I think was really helpful. I would have to say that I've also always been very interested in industrial psychology, which I actually think is one of the most neglected areas in sustainability. I mean, when you think about it, industry is where most of the environmental impact comes from. And so if you want to achieve certain outcomes in the industrial context, you have to deeply understand how companies work, how the industrial sort of structure generates outcomes in order to make that happen. And I feel that's largely been ignored by a lot of the sustainability community. At Sidley, I practiced in the environmental and energy area. And then I was also lent to major energy companies to help them develop their processes. That was very formative in how I approached sustainability throughout my career. I spent some time in government, as you said, and then in 2004, Honeywell asked me to come in and create their sustainability program. I had a very close relationship with the CEO and the board, and it was a very important initiative for the company. So sort of that opportunity to sort of start them from the beginning. Then throughout that period, I was also an adjunct professor of international environmental law at Columbia, and that culminated in a book I wrote on climate change in 2019. And so I've really kind of seen a lot of different facets of this area. Now I've moved into a new phase with a energy storage startup, Viridi. Viridi's combined technology from MIT, RIT, and NASA to make sort of super safe and very connected batteries. So I feel like I'm sort of seeing the full picture of sustainability.
That's
from
amazing.
Law to policy to technology.
Yeah, I think you touched a lot. The one thing, that we see more is ESG is not one, it's a disciplinary field. So, it's you need to understand the policies and the regulations and law. And if you can also touch the technology and going through Honeywell and going through other companies and going through the academia, I think you really you got the puzzle right. It sounds like it's that's a great journey. It's thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Thanks. I like to kick off interviews usually with talk about current events. We can ignore them, and I think in many cases they do influence and impact ESG and the environmental space a lot. Looking at the current turmoil in the markets, mostly following recent policy changes in the US, what is the impact of current events on renewable energy as an industry and as a market? And if I can add to that, how can companies in your industry continue to drive sustainability? I know this is
Yeah.
a big question, but I think you're up for the challenge.
It is a big question, but it's actually, I think we're actually at a very interesting point in the sustainability sort of evolution right now. And that's because in addition to decarbonization and sustainability more generally,
Yeah,
there's a number of other sort of global forces that are converging right now. And the ones I think are particularly important are grid resilience and energy resilience. And the reason why I say I think you have to start thinking about those together is we are at a really critical point in our energy system generally. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives our grid a C or a C minus rating. Most of it is decades old.
right.
And the Energy Association has reported that there were over 3,500 major grid outages in 2021.
Wow.
And so right now we're at a situation where the energy transition is going to happen almost irrespective of decarbonization. But when all three of these things are converging at the same time, there's going to be this. This is something that has an inevitability about it.
Right.
And so folks that have been doing sustainability for a number of years have maybe been focused on decarbonization, and some of them, frankly, right now are a little concerned with where policy is
Yeah.
going. I sort of say to them, this transition is going to happen no matter what. You have three major forces converging, and they're all sort of trending in the same direction. Those same forces that are going to improve resilience, improve reliability, improve grid stability are also leading us to decarbonization. And so I think that actually this is a time to be relatively optimistic.
Yeah. Agree. That's interesting, and I like you. It's not the first time when I talk to leaders in this space and talk about it is time to be optimistic. I like that. I'll stick with that. Um, Following that, I would like to know from your experience, what are your current customers' expectations in terms of sustainability? What are investors and other stakeholders are expecting from you and in your role as the Chief Sustainability Officer?
I think that our customers are really looking for comprehensive energy management. They're looking
Mhm.
for us to be able to decarbonize. That's still important to many of our
Yeah.
customers, but also to optimize on-site generation.
Mhm.
Right now, there is an awful lot of on-site generation happening, not just for a decarbonization purpose, but because people want to have more control over their sources of energy. And again, it ties into that reliability. They're also looking to us to manage potential uh, development needs. One of our largest installations was a 600 kilowatt hour installation of a battery indoors at a major medical center. And the
Oh,
reason why they installed that was because they were installing new cryogenic electron microscopes, and they simply did not have and would not be able to get the energy to drive that new equipment for about 5 or 6 years if they went the traditional utility route. And it would have cost them millions of dollars. And that's, I think, one of those just indications right now of the state we are in the grid. Right now, it's really not up to the task of providing energy throughout the country as needed. And by the way, we're sort of at a point now where we're planning to add about 50% to the load as we start to build more data centers. We delve more deeply into AI.
Yeah.
We electrify energy, we electrify transportation and heat, and we
Yeah.
onshore more manufacturing. So we kind of have an unstable situation, and we're saying, hey, let's dump another 50% of load on top of that. And
Yeah.
that makes a challenging situation. And basically, most of our customers are saying, we want to have more control over the energy that we are going to need to make sure it's there when we need it.
The reliability for that demand. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
You're being one step ahead of me because you kind of started answering the next question, which is great. I like that. I one of the things I've heard you mention, I think, on social media is as you also just mentioned now is about resiliency. I would
Mhm.
like to hear some more thoughts actually, because it's also very interesting to hear some more thoughts about resiliency in specifically in the context of well, we talked in the context of sustainability, but also in context of recent climate events and extreme weather we've seen across the country, both on the East Coast and West Coast, and how does that relate?
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, I've been talking about these forces as sort of separate things: grid
Mhm.
stability,
Yeah,
resilience, decarbonization. In fact, they are all interconnected. It's important to understand that as climate related events such as fires, floods, droughts increase, that increases the incidents that affect the reliability of the grid, so they make them
yeah,
more critical. I just got off a call with a good friend who's an engineer in a major urban environment. He has been without power for over a week because of storms in that
wow,
area. Um, One of the things that's interesting is how much storage is sort of like the one of the keystone technologies to solve for all of these challenges. The reason why
yeah,
storage is important is that with fossil fuels, we don't think about this that much, but it was really dependent on storage. The reason why fossil fuels worked so well is you could dig a pile of coal or
yeah,
get some oil, put it in a can, move it to where you wanted to, and then use it
yeah,
when you needed it. We've never been able to do that with electricity. But
right,
now, as we are going through this transition where the demand for electricity is increasing so much, we need to be able to do the same thing with electricity. And what are some of the things that that does? Right now, the reason why our grid is facing so much failure is not because it can't handle some of the sort of base load that people are utilizing. It's because the demand is highly variable. And so if someone needs 100 megawatts of power in an area at a certain period of time, you need to build a grid that can deliver 100
yeah,
megawatts of power, even though they may only use that for 2 hours or so. And so that
wow,
stress on the grid is really a factor of spikes in demand and peaks that the grid is not able to accommodate at its highest level. So what storage allows you to do is to take energy when demand is low, store it where it's needed, and then utilize it when demand rises. So you lessen the impact on the grid. So what I think about when I think about sort of how are all of these different forces connected together, I just think that, you know, as climate change impacts get worse, resiliency is going to decrease. The grid is going to be more stressed, and we need to
right,
find a solution for all of that together. Just one of the solutions that I think is so like demonstrates that so well is very recently Viridi batteries were used to power the voting machines down in the Carolinas where you are,
Yeah.
due to the impact in the storms. In the real storm impacted areas of
Yeah.
North Carolina, that was Viridi batteries that kept the voting machines running. And to me, that's sort of like such a perfect example because
Yeah.
you had these private, probably climate related storms, and they impact an absolutely critical function of voting. But storage enabled that failure to be addressed.
Wow, that's amazing, and that's a different angle to look at it. Yeah, this it I think the grid was always a critical infrastructure, but more and more now, and especially with these weather events that we see more and more. Reliability, it is the thing to think about. It's as I started with resilience, but I think what you said in the beginning about manufacturing and about energy, that
Mm-hmm.
all comes together. We'll continue in that line and talk a bit more about innovation. We touched it for a second, and I would like to address. Well, we all talk about AI, especially in the last 2 years, and I always say it's the joke is we can't have a conversation without saying the buzzword AI. But specifically, I think it's very relevant in renewable energy and from both ends of becoming more efficient, and on the other hand, the consumption of energy needed for AI. So I'd ask you, how do you see innovation in relation to specific to generative AI, and is it changing and how do you see it changing the ESG and the sustainability space?
Absolutely. So much of sustainability and so much of energy is about information. I saw a really interesting interview the other day with the CEO of Camus Energy. It's Astrid Atkinson, really brilliant woman, formerly director of software development at Google, and now she runs this energy company. And she made
Right.
some really interesting parallels between the grid, the electric grid, and the web. And in both cases, you have this widely dispersed and massive demand that's occurring in sort of almost unpredictable ways around the world. It has to be serviced centrally through like a data center, for example, or a generating plant, and then redistributed through a distribution system. And so there are sort of are a lot of parallels. The trick to getting that to work is to increase that amount of the increase the information available in terms of demand. When is demand going to be happening? When is demand going to be sort of multiplied against different users? Generation,
Mhm.
the impact on that system that's spreading those products around. And so both on the grid and on the web, it's very much a matter of taking these pieces of data and putting them into a comprehensible and actionable form so that they can be managed in the most efficient way. Now, in Viridi, this is really cool because we actually have a separate computer science division. It's based in Rochester, New York. And they
Right.
have been working very hard to advance the AI capabilities of our storage systems. One of the things, for example, that they're working on right now is a key component of storage is support for the grid. And that often
Yeah.
means that you have to be able to communicate to the grid, to the utility, what amount of energy you can make available to them in case they need it. So they can know it's what you call a virtual power plant. So they can know, well, okay, I have distributed in this area 50 megawatts of power in storage behind
Mhm.
the meter. Well, in order to really understand what power you can supply in a seamless and minimally impactful manner, you need to be able to predict what your energy needs are going to be in the future. And that's a complex matter. That has to do, it varies
Yeah.
tremendously over time. It's impacted by ambient data like temperature,
Yeah.
by the number of people on your site and things like that. And also the type of generation you're receiving. Is this a time when your solar on your roof happens to be producing a lot? Is this a time when you have a connection to the grid, but that grid is overloaded at peak? And so what our systems are doing now is they're not just looking and monitoring at your use, but they're actually predicting what your future energy use and needs are going to be. So they can optimize the storage that's resident in your battery, what you've committed to perhaps supplying back to the grid,
Yeah, and plan
to
better.
knowing and
Yeah.
plan better, know
Yeah.
exactly, and and it can be programmed right in. So you don't have to sit there and look at the data and say, oh, let's go ahead and charge now. It's
Yeah.
programmed in, so you can almost let it be a an independent decision-making source. Obviously, you can keep whatever control of it you want, but that's really where this grid 2.0 should be going. We should have instantaneous, accurate, and fluid information about demand, capacity, generation, all of that. And so it can be optimized. And AI is absolutely the tool to do that.
Amazing. Um, Ivan, before we wrap up, there's actually one last bonus question I asked all my guests, and I think this relates to the optimism we talked at the beginning, is from your experience and as you look in, let's call it into the future, what motivations and drivers do you see evolving in the near future for sustainability?
Well, I think I would really like to see the sustainability leaders of the future be deeply, deeply engaged with the manufacturing process and with green technology. Just looking at my own experience, I am a lean management certified expert. I got that certification working on an airplane engine manufacturing line. I'm a
Oh, wow.
lawyer. You'd think I'd never have, but it was so instructive to do that, to be there in an airplane engine factory, working on the line, applying lean principles. And I really kind of feel like that's where the sustainability leaders, or at least, a good portion of them of the future should be thinking. They should deeply understand what these systems are that they're trying to affect, and also be deeply engaged in the technology. Because to a large extent, technology is a big, big part of the answer.
I like that, and I have to agree. We see also in terms of customers, we see the impact. I think goes back to what you started with, as we see, and I like to say it a lot, ESG and the reporting part, although that's what mainly what we do, is I think it should be seen as a tool and opportunity. It's but we're not reporting just for the sake of reporting, even if it's a regulation. I think regulation shouldn't be the only driver. Obviously, when
Right.
there's when someone is chasing you, then it's a good motivation. But I think
Yeah,
we see and we scratch our heads a lot to find the business opportunity, and we see absolutely, there's more of that with manufacturing, as they are really where energy is used and where there's waste and where there's other parts of it which are big opportunities. And I think in terms of the energy and the reliability of the network, that's interesting. I think if more engineers would go into the grid and other infrastructures, would see that with my experience previously with waste and so on, where they are really asking in any way, looking for more and more engineers, which there's a shortage of to join. I think that's very
absolutely.
important. And I share that optimism with you. And I see the younger generation, they talk a different language and speak the language of environmental and sustainability. But as you said, I think more and more of them should go into the technology and invest in that time. I am completely with you on that. Um, Even this has been this was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I think I learned, and I'm sure our audience also learned from this. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you so much for giving me some time to talk. It's certainly something that I'm passionate about, and as you said, I'm optimistic, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think optimism with passion works really well. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And if any one of our viewers has a further question for Ivan, I think you can feel free to contact him on LinkedIn or reach out through the Viridi website. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. If you have any question for 7E, feel free to send an email to hello@the7e.com or reach out to us on LinkedIn. For more Inside ESG, subscribe to our channels on YouTube or Spotify. Ivan, again, thank you so much for joining. This is a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doron. It's great to see you.
Thank you.